K, Abekuta, Ogun State. My mother was from the Majekodumi family of Ake. And on my father's side, I traced my lineage from the Honorable Adegboyega Edun, who was secretary to the Egba United government under colonial rule. And he was a significant contributor to the development and the history of Abekuta. I had my early education at St. Paul's School, Ebute Meta in Lagos. And after that, I attended schools in London, UK, where my parents were then living, working, and studying. I obtained my bachelor's degree in economics from the University of London, Queen Mary College, and a master's degree in development economics from the University of Sussex, England, which included research at the well-regarded Institute of Development Studies. My career path has given me a strong background in investment banking, capital markets, economic policy formulation, and international development finance. After my youth service year, I began my professional life at Chase Merchant Bank in Lagos, which included training and exposure at Wall Street's Lehman Brothers and Chase Manhattan Bank's headquarters, both in New York. Thereafter, I took the opportunity to join the World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. through the highly competitive Young Professionals Program. I was an investment officer at IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, and then I became an economist at the World Bank. And in that role, I worked on macroeconomic policies and sector policies on Indonesia and India. Meanwhile, back home, entrepreneurial opportunities started unfolding, and I came back to Nigeria to take part in that process as a hands-on investor in a series of financial firms. And importantly, it was the government's liberalization of that sector that made it possible. I feel highly privileged to have worked with others to help build enduring legacies and strong institutions, including a leading independent investment bank, a ratings firm that is now a subsidiary of a global ratings agency, and a stock exchange quoted bank, among other successful companies. Likewise, in answering a call to service in Lagos State, I am proud to have been a part of the stunning success achieved under the inspirational leadership of the then Governor Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in whose cabinet I served as Commissioner for Finance. Recall that Governor Tinubu took over in a most challenging time. He faced those challenges squarely and overcame them and was successful. And I played my own part in the design, the implementation of innovative, homegrown, technology-driven solutions that increased the resources available to government, grew the revenue in large quantities, and thereby gave government the wherewithal to spend on infrastructure, social services, and of course, job creation. And there are parallels today. We all know that these are challenging economic times, and they also need to be confronted, to be wrestled with, and to be defeated in an effort to build a competitive economy. Aside from economics, may I say that I have engaged in youth empowerment. I am involved in the International Award for Young People Nigeria, which runs the Duke of Edinburgh's award. And having been a national amateur boxing champion during my student days, I hope you are not too surprised at that. I've taken great interest in working with the state boxing associations in Ogun State and Lagos State to channel the energies of young people in the right direction. Your Excellency, distinguished senators, let me conclude by saying, in my view, and I'm sure in the view of so many, Nigeria is too well blessed with resources, both human and natural, not to be successful. At the outset of this new administration, I am hugely optimistic that that success will come. On a personal note, success for me would be to retain a record of competence and integrity during my service. I am Adebayo Olawale Edun, and I humbly seek your confirmation of my nomination so that I can join you in service of our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you. These things were observed in bridges, and that is why a lot of reconciliations are taking place now to see how monies can be refunded and shared back to states and local governments. So God giving you the opportunity, we just want you to comply with the constitutional provisions. And you can commit to this chamber that if so granted the privilege that you will do so. Then Senator Goje also said that his question that touched on power was not well answered. It will look as if you are answering all the questions that pertain to government. It's because of the confidence that this chamber seems to repose in you. And that also reflects the feelings of Nigerians that you are coming to make a difference. So you can answer all now, and thereafter you take a bow.
The chair, very distinguished colleague, I quite agree with my colleague who fired the first salvo to ask questions. And because of the pedigree of the man standing before us this afternoon, who has been involved in so many achievements that Lagos as a state has recorded thus far, I strongly believe coming to the center stage is another great opportunity to showcase what is capable of doing in trying in assisting the current economic woes of our great country, Nigeria. Mr. President, before us is Mr. Adebayo Olawale Edun, who, according to his submission, which everybody have listened to, is from Ogun State, Ake precisely, the Ogun Central, and a senator representing Ogun State. And on behalf of the three of us, we are presenting to you a man who is not only committed, but who is dedicated to his job, and who have proven this over the years. Currently, is working with the present government as special advisor on monetary policies. And within the shortest time of assumption of this administration, the major economic reform that have been proposed thus far, which we believe in the long term will yield the desired fruit which we all as a Nigeria are expecting. I strongly believe that this man will do all within his capacity to assist this present government to turn around the fortune of this country from the economic angle. And we in Ogun State strongly believe that this is one of our best. And we are presenting to this Senate that we're in total support of his nomination and further confirmation by this Senate. And we seek the understanding of our colleagues to please join to support Mr. Adebayo Olawale Edun as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I so submit, distinguished colleague. Thank you.
The Constitution. Section 83 says, no monies shall be withdrawn from any public fund of the Federation other than the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation, unless the issue of those monies has been authorized by an act of the National Assembly. You got it? Section 80 sub 4 says, no money shall be withdrawn from the Consolidated Revenue Fund or any other public fund of the Federation, except in the manner prescribed by the National.
Mr. Nominee, Mr. Olawale Edun, congratulations for the nomination. And your name and reputation precedes you. I've never met you physically, but I've heard your name so many times over the years as someone who makes positive difference anytime you are given an assignment. Distinguished colleagues, you will recall that we have passed the amendment to the supplementary budget of 500 billion, approved $800 million, and of course recently a saving of about 1 trillion naira was made by the federal government. And the idea is to give money, maybe share money, 8,000 to some of our citizens who are so disadvantaged. My problem is, and that is where my question is coming from, those who are so disadvantaged, those that are so vulnerable in our country, are those that are in rural areas mostly, and of course we have few in urban centers, and those are not people with bank accounts. The financial inclusion apparently is not sufficient. And if we have to give monies to these vulnerable people who are really deserving of the share, how would you achieve that? You cannot go to villages or market squares and start giving cash. If you have to make transfer, they have no accounts. You will end up giving the money to those that do not deserve the money. So how do we intend to achieve this first assignment of giving Nigerians, those that are so vulnerable, those that are so poor, that need the attention and support of governments, not only the federal government, but especially the federal government, when they have no accounts, and yet we are saying we should share the money? I believe that we have an answer to this, because it's going to be our first test. We have to get this distribution properly done, because Nigerians need this, almost everyone. But there are those that need it most, and those that need it most have no bank accounts. So I want you specifically to respond to this, because it's something that we should address, and address very soon before we start distributing the money. Whether it is national register or state registers, the people remain without bank accounts. How do you give them this money? Thank you very much.
Because
very distinguished colleagues, so much has been said
and I believe there is a reason for such. One, it is generally suspected that Mr. Olawale Edun might be heading a very sensitive ministry. So I can understand. His background also attests to the fact that the seriousness of an assignment that might be given to him is such that as elected representatives of the people, we should be concerned. Mine, Mr. President, is to make a very short comment and to ask only one question. My comment will have to do also with the fact that Mr. Olawale Edun is well and favorably known to me. I was also privileged to have served in the same cabinet with him under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as governor of Lagos State, where I was privileged to have served the government and people of Lagos State for 11.5 years under 2 governors. What I want to attest to on my own part is his strength of character and the fact that he's a motivator. I recall with a very high sense of nostalgia how Mr. Olawale Edun will motivate and energize other members of cabinet in very difficult situations, and how he believed sincerely that there was a solution to every challenge, to every problem. And I think having someone like him in the cabinet of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at a time like this will be a major plus for our country. Number 2, I also want to attest to the fact that he's one person who can stand his ground. He was not a yes man in that cabinet. And he was somebody who saw his service in public service only as a temporary thing. At every point, he carried himself like a professional. And he always believed he had an alternative address. So he wasn't somebody who would just take anything. Why am I saying this? It's because where we are right now, we need a minister in charge of our finance who will be able to stand his ground. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, part of the problem of our economy in the last decade was that we had ministers of finance who were not able to stand their ground to draw a line of demarcation between monetary policies and fiscal policies. Regardless of how a governor of central bank is, the minister of finance is the #1 person in charge of the economy. And he must be able to stand his ground. He must be able to insist on a line of demarcation being drawn between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Not a situation where the central bank will intervene in everything and you will not even know where the mandate of the central bank starts and where it ends. So, if I will ask him any question today, my question will be, Mr. Olawale Edun, in the event, by the grace of God, that you are screened and confirmed by this Senate, and in the event that you are posted by Mr. President to the Ministry of Finance, how would you ensure that our fiscal policies are clearly demarcated from our monetary policies so that we don't continue to have this challenge in our economy? Thank you, Mr. President.
Our nominee. Mine is not a question, but a reminder. Reminder, because you are in charge of the monetary policies and we know the role you can play, plus the fact that you are a politician. The recurrent expenditure in this country, if you look at their statistics, in 2018 was 3.5 trillion. It's now 8.2 trillion. No employment, no promotion, but yet the cost is escalating. Secondly, our rate of debt servicing, which I believe you know. For the first time around, almost 90 or 95% of our income is going into debt servicing. And that is because of the borrowing. Number 3, our savings from the removal of the oil subsidy, as mentioned by Mr. President yesterday, was up to 1 trillion. And my confusion is, we are saving 1 trillion, and we here approved borrowing of $800 million, and also approved a supplementary budget of 500 billion for the palliatives. I'm glad Mr. President reversed and took another look at the modalities given by the World Bank. That is to share 8,000 per month and all that. Mr. President has done the right thing by looking at that again. And also, you know that our foreign reserve, for the first time again, is going into negative. I don't know the specific amount, but we are in negative. And also, the exchange rate, as it is now, is 867 or so, and it's moving on. And you know, with our current situation, the more the foreign exchange moves up, the more the prices of the product will. You are a politician, and you are an expert. And for me, personally, my expectation is so high. Just a reminder. Lastly, when people get opportunity like this, we that have so much expectation, and suddenly they change into something else. They close their doors. They don't want to listen to the representative of the people. They don't want to get ideas, and they say they are experts. And nothing is working under the experts. We have that experience. Please, please, the expectation is high on you and this government. When you get there, your doors should be open, and you should listen, and also take measures, immediate one, on this exchange rate, and then the palliatives that the government is planning. We should see it. Lastly, sir, please don't share this money. Let it be shared among the people. I mean, the savings. We have 1 trillion. If we are to share it, let's calculate Nigerians or divide it by 774 local governments and let it get down. Not to share it among some people that will also go and mismanage it again. That's my advice.
Distinguished Senate Leader, Federation, and that of Accountant General of federal government, because you have the consolidated revenue post. Money goes in there for the entirety of the federation, right? Then you also have the federal government account. So when we go to FAC, federal government gets its own share. So the federal government should have Accountant General of federal government of Nigeria, who will take care of the percentage that goes to the federal government of Nigeria. Then the entirety of the money that will go into the federation, the consolidated revenue account of the federation, to be shared to the federal government, the states, and local governments. We thought that should also be managed by the Accountant General of the federation. But right now, only one Accountant General for both the federal government of Nigeria and the Accountant General of the federation. So there are times that we are now, sometimes the federal government tends to spend money that really should have been spent by the 3-tier of governments. And so the result is that there is it's almost like a unitary expenditure framework. So what will be your view if you are given the portfolio of Minister of Finance? Will you want to have that kind of separation? Because these allo chambers will be very glad to help you in minutes.
First of all, let me thank so many of the senators that have spoken today for their kind words regarding my own acceptability and suitability. It places a heavy burden of responsibility, but it is a responsibility I will not shirk. It's a challenge I will not back down from. And it's if given the opportunity, I will do my best to ensure that it is not wasted. Your Excellency, I would like to start where you ended. And I think consistency is very important. In the days when I was in public service at the sub-national level, I did, under our president, then governor of Lagos, advocate that there should be a separation between the Accountant General of the Federation and the Accountant General of the federal government. I would like to reserve the right to review and reaffirm that the situation still remains what it was then, which led to that position being taken. However, I will say this. When we see the kind of difficulty that leads to reconciliation upon reconciliation and disagreement between the fiscal division of resources between the federals and the state, definitely there is need for more resources to ensure that the financial relationship between the federal and states and local governments is kept up to date and constitutional. Having said that, may I now go back to what was a plethora of questions regarding the economy. I do not want to take your time, your distinguished senators. Senator Abiru, a very good friend, had indicated that it would be useful to say where we are in terms of economic reform, given that Mr. President has been in office for 2 months, and in that period, I think you will agree with me, he has done a lot. But let me first of all summarize. Much has been said about what happened in Lagos regarding its economic and financial turnaround. In sum, there were 4 things. First of all, there was a commitment to technology. Technology was unsparingly and ruthlessly and robustly used to help increase revenue generation by blocking loopholes and increasing efficiency. Secondly, and in the same way, there was total computerization of the operations of government. In effect, that was civil service reform by another name. Thirdly, there was reliance on the private sector and private investment to drive the economy. And fourth, there was efficient use of the financial markets. Lagos was put in a position financially in terms of its records where he could access the domestic financial markets for long-term financing. That, in a nutshell, what was done in Lagos, and clearly much of it is repeatable at the federal level. As regards the state of the economy, let us remember where we have come from. In 1990, the wealth, the income per capita, the GDP per capita of Nigeria was higher than that of China. As recently as 1990, today, Chinese per capita income is $13,000 nearly. Nigeria's is just over $2,000. So you can see the gap that has opened up. And the reason why was that production, growth, was stalled by insecurity, by inflation, and by wasteful government expenditure to a large extent. However, in the last 2 months, there really has been a turnaround in the Nigerian economy, which is room for tremendous optimism. The senator from Otumba, Benga Daniel, talked about debt. When you look at what has happened with revenue, it is like having a bucket with a hole in it and pouring water in it. The minute you block the hole, the revenue piles up. I'm sure your state governors will tell you that their fiscal situation has turned around, and same with the federal government. It's not quite a question of having so much money that is a question of how do we spend it. But I assure you, there will be a continuous improvement in the fiscal situation at the federal and the state level, and that takes care of the debt situation. Owing is not a bad thing as long as you have the revenue to service. And it was and is the commitment of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to curtail spending, to curtail inefficiencies, and also to stay within the law in terms of borrowing to finance government operations. The subsidy removal and the exchange rate elimination of multiple windows has left us in a very strong position to go forward. However, and it is the concern that Mr. President has been raising, in the time between the several months that it takes for the benefits of economic reform to come through, there is pain. There's substantial economic pain. And that's why the task of government and the commitment of President Tinubu is to ensure that the poorest, the weakest, and the most vulnerable in society are protected through that period. And distinguished senators, it is not just a job for the federal government. The states have their role to play. The corporate sector has its role to play. Individuals have their role to play. The economy has been turned around and put on a positive path by the bold and courageous monetary and fiscal measures of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And what remains is for us to do all we can to support this process so that we stay the course and move this country to the level of a prosperous nation, which is where it rightfully belongs and the people of Nigeria deserve to be. Thank you.
That we unanimously, our nominee, you see that everybody is waiting to ask questions, and so many hands are up, but we can't allow you to answer all the questions in one day, because after your confirmation, if by the Senate, we may need to invite you back so that we can have maybe closed session. So the minority leader, do you have anything you want to say? Please, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. President.
That they are very qualified and they are pouring accolades. I wanted to hear those who have negative things. I have not heard. Okay, so in the absence of any negative thing, I would like you to posit answers, which if you listen very well, you'll notice that all the questions dovetail into one. How are you going to do what you did in Lagos here so that Nigeria can benefit from you? But mine, I want...
of our distinguished senators that have spoken have spoken about the exploits of this nominee in Lagos is explored relating to how the team that was headed by our current president rejuvenated the economy of Lagos to success. Now, as a principal person in that team, one of the most important critical actors of that thing. Now, I want to know if you are eventually confirmed and you become the Minister of Finance, how are you going to apply the techniques that you use in that period that you serve as Lagos State Commissioner of Finance in bringing about economic prosperity to our country? That is, replicating what you did in Lagos at the national stage. I know you do that, but just in summary, because I know it's going to be a full-scale kind of explanation, but summarize. Number two, I know we operate a federal system of government in this country, but how are you going to a kind of draw the attention of our various subnationals to toe the line exactly, just like what you did in Lagos, in the area of revenue generation? Because a lot of our states are suffering from that, to lack of being able to exploit their full potentials in terms of generation. How? Though we operate a federal system, it's not something that is mandatory. But as a Minister of Finance, how are you going to help in bringing them to follow the line that you use in Lagos? Thank you and congratulations.
Leader of the Senate, turn round.
President sitting as chair, my respectful, distinguished colleagues, and the nominee. I join other colleagues to congratulate you for the nomination, and we believe that is one of the best choices that this country will make. I have just a question, and it's related to the fiscal policy. Government responsibility is to cater for growth and stability. It also should concern itself with allocation and also the distribution of such resources, generating the resources in terms of revenue, and then coming to the budgetary system. Looking at what has been going on, and with the perspective of what we were able to achieve in the 9th Senate, with the cycle of budget coming from the beginning of the year to the end, there is a kind of lacuna I have seen, which always make us to amend the Appropriation Act, either the supplementary or the main act, by many months into the preceding year. Into the coming year. In my view, or in your view, but let me take my view first. I feel it's like correcting an anomaly and then bringing it back from another corner. As a country, if you look at our budgetary system, compare vis-a-vis the revenue, the distribution, and the allocation of these resources, do you still think the budgetary system we are adopting at this moment is good for this country? Thank you, Nominee.
Is somebody that I know very well. So it will be very, very unfair if I don't make my own remarks here. And at the same time, I probably will also be sharing, I'll be asking him to share some thought with us. Number one, let me acknowledge that, number one, it was my senior in banking, so people like us grew up in banking to know him. And from his CV, you can attest that he's an accomplished banker. Equally, he was my predecessor as the former Commissioner of Finance in Lagos. As you are all aware, I was also a Commissioner of Finance, but years after he had passed through that particular corridor. And part of the major legacies that he left behind is part of what we rode on and continue to improve the lot of Lagos, and which is still continuing till today. So in Mr. Edu, I see a well-accomplished professional, but there is a part that people, my colleagues, so I join and I support everything my colleagues have said as well. But there's a part that I think has been conspicuously missing, which is the fact that he's equally a grassroots politician. I can attest to that. And I also must also attest to the fact that even in this current dispensation, this current administration, I've worked closely with him. So I support his nomination, just like everybody have done, but I also would like to ask him a question, or not necessarily a question, but I would like him to share some of the reforms that this current administration has embarked upon, because I happen to know that he's also a part and parcel of all the reforms that we are beginning to see. And specifically, I would like him to speak to the issues around the macroeconomic distortions that this current administration is trying to confront and improve upon. So, Mr. President, distinguished ladies, my distinguished colleagues, I support Mr. Edu's nomination, and I plead that we all support his nomination. Thank you, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleague.
Mr. Wale Edu, welcome, and your CV speaks for itself, and for what you said so far, many of us are convinced. But I'm so concerned with two questions, one of which must have been asked said differently by our colleagues here. You spoke so eloquently about how you helped as one of the teams that took Lagos State from where it was to a great height. That time is upon us now as a nation. And so we ask you, what are you going to do differently? What will you do now, given our economic depression today, to help Mr. President to revive our economy again, given the fall free of our naira, given the fact that the ordinary Nigerians can't even afford 3 square meals? 2, corruption is so endemic in our society. And one of the bastions, one of the agencies that fights corruption, that ought to fight corruption, is the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation. As you may know, the audit bill has not been signed. Be that as it may, you're also aware maybe that there's this tussle between that office and the Office of the Accountant General, and indeed the Office of the Minister of Finance. I believe, that that office needs independence for it to work properly. And so I ask, will you be in the forefront to fight to make sure that that Office of the Auditor General will have the independence that it deserves so that it can ably fight corruption and reduce corruption in our country? Thank you.
And patriotic favor. My name is Shoaib Afolabi Salisu, representing Ogun Central. Mr. President of the Senate, distinguished colleagues, at a point in our history like now, we require a man like Wale Edu. If some of you were aware of the transformation of Lagos from a state that was making a paltry sum of 600 million naira internally generated revenue in 1999 to billions of naira in the first term of Bola Tinubu as governor, and today is in tens of billions of naira. If you are looking for the man who made that happen, you have the privilege of seeing him here today, is Wale Edun. This man deployed technology to connect all the 38 tax stations in Lagos State, ensuring that the revenues of Lagos were being monitored as they happened. He blocked all the leakages. He streamlined the procurement process, ensuring that the resources of Lagos were utilized. It was when he was Commissioner for Finance that the funds of Lagos State were seized by the then federal government. It was through his ingenuity that Lagos survived that onslaught and he remained afloat among the committee of state. If you are looking for the man that managed Lagos State economy and it became the 5th largest economy in Africa and certainly the biggest in Nigeria, this is a man with an uncommon combination of public service finance, public service experience. He worked in World Bank, he worked in Chase Merchant Bank, and he has also led a number of other initiatives. Ordinarily, I should join my other 2 senators from Ogun State to plead that you should take a bow. But for 2 reasons, we will ask him questions. It will be a disservice for a man of his experience and expertise, a man that will require the support of the Senate now and then to come here and not build the confidence in you, because the reforms of this administration, particularly in the economic space, will require the support of the Senate. And the Senate must have the confidence that the man they're entrusting that responsibility to is capable of doing so. Therefore, he is from Ogun State. When you have a good product, you are not afraid of that product being subjected to interrogation. So we will ask him questions. The second reason we will ask him question is this. This man is most likely, there's no price for guessing, is most likely going to be in charge of our finance and economy. Just yesterday, the president himself addressed the nation. This man that's going to be the anchor man will also have this platform to address the nation. So, Mr. Wale Edun, I'm proud of you from Ogun Central, from Ogun State. You have a pedigree that we are proud of, both your family and you as a person. What my colleagues would like to know, in summary, how would the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President translate to prosperity for our country and enhancement of welfare, well-being, and wellness of the ordinary citizen? Not just in terms of the growth in the GDP or some statistics of reduction in inflationary rate or reduction in MPC rate. You have done it before. In few words, just get that assurance, build that confidence. You are capable of doing it. Distinguished colleagues, after he has answered this question, I plead with you. Give him the honor, give him the privilege, treat him decently, and let him take a bow. Thank you.
SARS, don't take over the work of the presiding officer. So let me call on distinguished Senator Neda.
Let me start by saying that in Mr. Olawale Edun, for us it's a good day because in him we have somebody in whom we are very, very pleased. I don't want to waste time because my colleague, Senator Adeola, has said so much. All I just want to add is that Mr. Olawale Edun have been a professional of no misstanding in the last 35 or 40 years since I've known him. Many people might not be aware that it was by the whiskers that he missed being in the immediate past cabinet. But having said this, I'd like to ask Mr. Edun a simple question. It's common knowledge that Nigerians' debt today is in the region of about 40 trillion naira. When you add the ways and means to that, probably another 20 trillion naira is there. I'd like to know what your thoughts are and how you think we can get out of this debt quagmire. Having said that, Mr. President, sir, I have no doubt that Mr. Olawale Edun is one of the best in his generation. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Distinguished Senator Salisu Shuaibu Afolabi.
Presenting Gombe Central, Gombe State. Mr. Nominee, I stand here to support you. I stand to support all the submission given by my colleague, Senator Solomon Olalimeko. Mr. Nominee, I know you way back in the year around 2000 when you were the Commissioner of Finance, Lagos. And you people from Lagos, led by you, came up with the idea of bringing in Enron company to stabilize the power system in Lagos. And I remember you are one of the key people that I was Minister of State for Power, we had a series of meetings with you, and you defended fiercely the introduction of Enron to stabilize the power in Lagos State. Mr. Nominee, if by chance Mr. President appoints you either as a Minister of Finance or Minister of Power, what would you do? Will you go back to the Enron style and bring back something bigger than Enron to stabilize the Nigerian power system? Or what would you do differently to ensure that we have stable electricity in this country, without which we'll never have stable and vibrant economy in the country? I so submit. Thank you, but I support you 100%. He's a good person. He's well-grounded, very good. My series of meetings with him were so impressive that when I saw his name, I was very, very much impressed. I know that he will do wonders to this administration. Thank you.
I'm from Plateau State, and I represent Plateau North. Mr. President, we are all aware that the Nigerian currency is a very weak currency, very, very weak. And by our monetary policy, I strongly believe that if we allow the Naira to continue to float, it will become more weaker, day in, day out. I want to ask, sir, do you agree that as a monetary policy, Nigeria should have a benchmark for the exchange rate of the Naira with the dollar? And I think you will give us a very good answer. Thank you.